Welcome everybody, welcome to your show Political Landscape of this week, the 5th of January 2024. It's not without any worries that we start this new year because the theaters of war are still going on, and Professor Michel Chossudovsky will come back today on what is going on in the Middle East with the situation over there and these theaters. Hello Professor, how are you today?
Yes, Good afternoon. Delighted to be on the program. This is our first program for the year 2024, and I certainly wish everybody a happy new year. But I think we have to focus on what's happening in Palestine. It's certainly a genocide which is beyond description. It is very carefully documented in terms of the impacts on people's lives, on the deaths of children, of the destruction of residential areas, where hospitals and public buildings are targeted. All of this is marked by derogation of the basic and fundamental premises of international law. This is a crime against humanity on an unprecedented scale, and I think we should realize that. I think anybody who is committed to the value of human life and solidarity with Palestine recognizes that this is beyond description and that it is an act, a criminal act, not solely on the part of the Netanyahu government, but on the part of the allies, not solely on the part of Joe Biden. He's also a criminal under international law, but it's what in French they call la classe politique. In other words, politicians specifically in Western countries, allies of Washington. They are Canada, certainly. And it's not enough simply say we have to have a ceasefire. No, the issue is that this is defined under international law, and we can quote the documents, Geneva Convention, Nuremberg. This is a crime against humanity, and it is also genocide. And the evidence is there to say that it is evident that there is a genocide. Now, I should mention that in the last couple of weeks, there have been several initiatives to reach out to the International Court of Justice in The Hague and to bring a formal or to at least to initiate a procedure with the International Criminal Court in The Hague. And I myself signed these these initiatives. But I have to say that the ICC is also criminalized. Okay? I can say that because I was a member of the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Commission, which initiated a procedure against the State of Israel. That was years back in 2014-15, but we succeeded in formulating a very detailed action by the tribunal that was under the helm of the former Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, and I have examined the actions of the ICC, and I can say not only are they negligent, not only are they are complicit in crimes against humanity, but they are negligent in their actions. And any kind of procedure which is brought to the attention of the ICC will not be treated immediately, nor will there be any kind of statement from the ICC that Israel and the United States and NATO are involved in a crime against humanity. Now, I've reviewed the documents, and there is a statement on the part of the former ICC prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda, with respect to the investigation in Palestine. And you may see her on the screen now. It's under the label dedication, integrity, respect. And the irony is that on a particular date, which is the 3rd of March 2021, the ICC prosecutor addressed an initiative which was formulated on the 13th of June 2014. In other words, and it was an issue pertaining to Palestine. So there you are. I answer the question, what will happen with the ICC? They will simply sit on it, okay? They will sit on it for several years, as they are sitting on it right now. And then, so Fatou Bensouda took on a follow-up of an initiative formulated on the 13th of June of 2014, and that waited until the 3rd of March 2021. Now, what I'm saying is that, and then there's another element. Take the president of the ICC, not the prosecutor, the president. He, in the course of the month of December, had meetings with the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Guterres. He got together and then he made a statement. You can read that statement on the homepage of the ICC, and then what he has to say to the Secretary General of the United Nations, he complains that pressures have been put on the ICC and accusations have been, well, of course, if international law is criminalized, we're certainly going to respond in the same ways we respond to the inaction of Netanyahu and Joe Biden. But there you are, is that the president of this important international body is co-opted, and he is replicating exactly the discourse of the Netanyahu government. And the third element, of course, which is also of significance, and that points to an initiative taken by the current prosecutor of the ICC, was called Karim Khan. Now, Karim Khan went to visit Israel in early December, and then he states, we must show that the law is there on the front lines and that it is capable of protecting all. Well, I can tell you, he didn't. The only person he actually protected was Netanyahu, because he came in. He had meetings with the Palestinians, but not with Hamas. Certainly not. And we know that Mahmoud Abbas is also co-opted, and then he blamed everything on Hamas. And then he accused the Palestinians of crimes against humanity when there were deaths on the Israeli side, I think, but there we have to look at the whole mechanism of false flags and so on, and the fact that there were factions in Hamas which may have been complicit, but Netanyahu knew that because those elements inside Hamas have been supported for several years by the Netanyahu government. But the thing is, he didn't go, first of all, from my understanding, he didn't go to Gaza. He didn't go to Gaza. He talked with people. He gives his sort of personalized reports. He went to the kibbutz and so on and so forth. And the music festival in Bethlehem. And as far as Gaza is concerned, he points to the violations of international humanitarian law by Hamas, okay, and other armed groups in the Gaza Strip. He doesn't say anything about the bombings of tens of thousands. Well, now it's more than 20,000 people who have been killed, and that not counting people who are in the rubble, people who are injured, newborn babies. Nothing. That is Mr. Prosecutor Karim Khan. He is a criminal as well. And he's more of a criminal than the others because he is there to represent the ICC, which is the principal body of international law. Well, he's co-opted as well. Now, I come to what is the solution? Well, I must say, as I mentioned, I signed some of these initiatives. I signed the initiative Code Pink, but my message is the following: we're not going to go anywhere with any kind of dialogue involving the International Criminal Court, because the International Criminal Court are co-opted and the international system of justice is criminalized, as it is in many countries. We cannot, under any circumstances, rely on negotiations with either Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Biden, both of whom are responsible under international law of, quote, crimes punishable under international law, and they are not interested in putting an end to the genocidal attacks against the people of Palestine. That is abundantly clear, and I think what we have to envisage, and it's something which was envisaged during World War I, but it didn't succeed. But it was carried out in World War I when soldiers there abandoned the battlefield and they fraternized. There was a project of fraternization between opposing sides in the trenches. People who have looked into the history of World War I will be familiar with that. But what is important, and that is that in international law, we have what is called the Charter of Nuremberg, and the judgment of Nuremberg, which dates back to 1950. And if we look at the principles of the Nuremberg Charter, we will come up with a conclusion that under Principle 6 of the Nuremberg Charter, both Netanyahu as well as Joe Biden would be punishable for crimes under international law. And these are the following: crimes against the peace, war crimes, crimes against humanity. That is Article 6 of the principles of international law recognized in the Charter of Nuremberg. There are similar statements in other documents of international law. But what is very important here is that under Article 4 of Nuremberg Charter, there is a procedure which pertains to the combatants. And I will read it to you. It says, the fact that a person, and this person means Israeli US soldiers, pilots, acted pursuant to order from a government or a superior does not relieve them of responsibility under international law. In other words, they are obliged, if they have the moral choice, to abandon the battlefield. Okay, so that is Principle 4 of Nuremberg. Again, I can't go into the details of all the legal implications of all this, but it is very clear that if we make that moral choice possible to enlisted Israeli, American, and NATO servicemen and women, and specifically to those enlisted by Israel, which constitute the vast majority, they have the moral obligation to abandon the battlefield, because the governments as well as the superiors are involved in crimes against humanity as defined under Principle 6 of the Nuremberg Charter. So what I'm saying, that we should not abandon the initiatives in relation to the ICC, the International Criminal Court. Those are going ahead. There'll be no response, or there may be some sort of safe phasing response. But both the prosecutor as well, the president of the ICC, are corrupt. And they are complicit in the criminalization of international justice. So that what we are saying now is we are calling upon Israeli and American soldiers and pilots, because those are the ones that are principally involved. And we're also calling on the people of Israel and Palestine to support this initiative, namely that Israeli and American soldiers and pilots must abandon the battlefield as an act of refusal to participate in a criminal undertaking against the people of Gaza. And that is what we must ensure, and we must at the same time ensure that public opinion, both in Israel as well as across the planet, a planet of 8 billion people, join this campaign of first of all, informing the IDF and NATO and US servicemen and women that obeying criminal orders emanating from a government which is responsible for war crimes is also of a criminal nature, unless, of course, there's the issue of moral, of making a moral choice possible. because, of course, soldiers are they are threatened by the commanders who take who are part of a hierarchy. So we have to make that moral choice possible to enlisted Israeli, American, and NATO servicemen and women to abandon the battlefield. And again, it is also something which has to be reflected within the realm of public opinion in all the campaigns and protest movements. This notion of calling upon servicemen and women to abandon the battlefield should be included. And it's not, I would say, that we have to rely on that, because it is the only action that is currently possible to sort of repeal to repeal the action which has been undertaken, which is a genocide against the people of Palestine. So that is a very important element. Now, I wanted to address a couple of other issues which have to do with the militarization in the Red Sea, which is also absolutely fundamental.
About to ask you, they are doing many things in order to affect many region. Would you like to tell us what countries are really touched by what is done?
Well, first of all, let me first look at the situation in the Red Sea. Now, the Red Sea, of course, is a maritime route which integrates the trade from Asia right through to the Mediterranean, going through the Suez Canal. Now, what has happened? The Houthis from Yemen have attacked, or they have waged certain attacks, which they present as being against Israel and in solidarity with Hamas. But at the same time, I should mention that actions of this nature could be used by the United States and Israel as a false flag. In other words, they are attacking us. We will respond. We're going to build up the militarization of the Red Sea, and already the US government has already initiated that procedure, demanding its NATO allies to come in. Now, what that is leading to, and it's already ongoing, it's the impact on maritime trading routes, which are very consequential, because all the trade which goes to Europe, let's say from China, and we know that China produces practically everything we consume on a daily basis. It is part of our bundle of consumption. And if this trade is deviated around Africa, which it is, and that's ongoing, what does it do? It pushes up the cost of transportation, and it pushes up the price of commodities, of all, not strictly consumer goods and energy, but every single category of commodity which comes from Asia, and which then goes through the canal, the Suez Canal, and up to the Mediterranean. And essentially, the victims are twofold. One, China, and of course, China, the United States is threatening China, and this kind of action has a devastating impact on the Chinese economy. And secondly, the European Union. Well, the European Union is supposed to be allies. They're supposed to be allies, but then they're not allies. They're victims. They have been targeted in many ways from an economic standpoint. Well, remember the Nord Stream 2 and the sabotage which was waged against it in September of last year. Well, I'm sorry, it's the year before that. We're now in 2024. So that the whole notion that well, of course, it's the flow of energy into the European Union. Now, the flow of energy into the European Union, the flow of commodities into the European Union will be affected by this militarization of the Red Sea. And at the same time, I can say from my reviews that the United States is waging an economic war against Western Europe, and you can see it. And in fact, they're picking up the pieces of economies, of national economies, particularly in Germany, which are very advanced, and they're leading them into a situation of bankruptcies and so on. And a lot of this is due to the disruption in the trade between the Russian Federation on the one hand and the European countries, and of course the sabotage of Nord Stream 2. But now we have another sabotage. It's to block the trade routes which go through the Red Sea and up through the Suez Canal into the Mediterranean. And there we are. We can expect that this militarization will have devastating consequences both on the Asian economies as well as on the Western European economies, which largely constitute the European Union. Now, there's another element there, is that, and I'll go back in history, and that has to do with the history of US-led war. Now, the history of US-led war is largely based, again, on economic targets. There you are, you've got the Middle East, which constitutes some, I don't know the exact percentage, it could be, but it's certainly it could be something of the order of 60%. It's petroleum, natural gas, it's Iraq, Iran, the Emirates, and so on and so forth. Of course, it's Saudi Arabia, but the stranglehold on the Middle East by the United States and NATO is there essentially because there's a tremendous amount of wealth. And what they have done, well, I can say that scenarios for, let's say, for committing, for waging a regional war in the Middle East have been on the drawing board of the Pentagon for more than 30 years. And we recall that in 1995, Central Command, that's the regional command for the Middle East, said in an official document, they said, first Iraq, then Iran. Well, Iraq has been invaded. I should say Iraq has been invaded several times. The so-called Gulf War, that was 1991. Then you have 2003. That was the official, was it 2000? Yeah, 2003 was the war against Iraq. And then there was another war which Obama led under the guise of counterterrorism measures, the war on terrorism, and that was started in 2014. So essentially what they want to do is to confiscate the wealth of these countries. They're not interested necessarily in a military victory. What they want is destroy countries, take over their wealth, and move on. And they're doing that in all major regions of the world. In all major regions of the world, there's economic warfare, and I could say, having reviewed declassified documents pertaining to war in the Middle East, or in fact, in waging a world war. Okay, they have scenarios of a world war. Most of them are confidential. They're classified, but a couple of them have been released, and I'll just mention two. One was called, that was more than 20 years ago. It was called Theater Iran Real Term. I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. Theater Iran Short Term. Okay. So that essentially they had already decided that they wanted to attack Iran. I'm sorry, it's theater Iran near term. That's the correct definition, and it has a logo. But then some years later, they envisaged another simulation, which was very detailed, which was leaked to the Washington Post. You won't find it on the pages of the Washington Post. It was called, it was the scenario of a Third World War with potentially the use of nuclear weapons. And it was based on four imaginary countries, okay? These were not real countries, but they didn't want to put the names of the countries, but the names of the countries were pretty obvious because it was a war against Choria, China, Rubek, Russia, Birmingham, Iran, and Nemesi, North Korea. These are the four countries which are always mentioned in war plans, that they consider these four countries because they consider that they constitute a threat to the security of the homeland, the United States of America, blah, blah, blah. But there we are. Now, what they want to do in the Middle East is to incite Iran to join the war, which it hasn't. But they are building pretexts and justifications for a possible war against Iran, which would be absolutely devastating. Because, first of all, Iran has very advanced conventional war capabilities. It does not have nuclear weapons, and that is corroborated, although Netanyahu goes and says, oh, they've got nuclear weapons. They're threatening us. Well, in your face, Netanyahu, the country which has a whole bunch of nuclear weapons is Israel. And it's that's not official because they've never been recognized as a full-fledged nuclear weapon state, but they are. And that there are tons of evidence to that effect. So that bear in mind that if Iran is sucked into this war, and even if Russia is sucked into this war, which up to a point Russia has intervened in northern Syria in a bilateral agreement with the government of Bashar al-Assad. But if Iran is sucked into this war, then we are in a very different environment. But I should mention that the anti-war movement should take the initiative to question the legitimacy of US foreign policy. They have to look at the geopolitical dimensions. They have to look at the fact that this war could then spill over into other regions of the world, and they have to take into account that policymakers in the United States are pretty much illiterate because they don't understand that nuclear war is ultimately conducive to. There's no end game for nuclear war. You can't win a nuclear war. But that's the decision makers, including Biden. Hillary Clinton, of course, made important statements when she was candidate. They believe in their own propaganda. They believe that nuclear weapons are safe for civilians. And that is the kind of dogma which is now permeating it's permeating political discourse, but they've changed the rules, and that happened quite a number of years ago. It started in the wake of the 9/11 attacks with the Nuclear Posture Review, where they started saying, well, a certain category of nuclear weapons is, quote, harmless to the civilian population because the explosion is underground. They were referring to the tactical nuclear buster bunker bombs, which in effect are supposed to go underground. I checked the specifics. It goes something like 20 or 30 feet underground, and then it explodes. And to say that a tactical nuclear weapon or a mini nuke is harmless to surrounding civilian population is tantamount to saying, and they're basing this on labels. So they label the bomb. A big, like you label a pack of cigarettes and you say, you change a label and you say smoking is good for your health. And then smoke more and you'll be healthy. Well, they're saying exactly the same thing. They say the tactical nuclear weapon, mini nukes, 6 times a Hiroshima bomb, in fact, it's even up to 12 times, is safe for the surrounding civilian population because the explosion is underground. Now, that is entrenched in US military doctrine. The certain categories of nuclear weapons are now defined as conventional weapons in the conventional war theater, and a 3-star general could take the decision without consulting Joe Biden. Of course, probably that kind of scenario would not take place because there's a decision-making process which goes, as I mentioned earlier, through Strategic Command headquarters in Nebraska, and that Strategic Command headquarters in Nebraska has a control over not only over the actions of the Pentagon, but under the actions of most of its allies, including, of course, the State of Israel and NATO. It's not to say that everything goes through Strategic Command headquarters, but important deployments would normally be even by allies and go through some form of centralization in military planning. So I must conclude by saying we are at a very dangerous crossroads in our history, and it is very important that the peace movements be aware of the geopolitical dimensions, that they be fully aware of false flags. Now, false flags have existed from the dawn of mankind. Every war of religion that we've had is a false flag. People don't wage wars for religious purposes. They wage wars because they want to conquer a country and take over its assets. That is really what the ultimate objective of these hegemonic wars on the part of the United States, which is it's an imperial war, and they want to take over control over the resources, and they also want to ensure that they don't have any encroachment by military powers which might which might confront them and that includes the 4 countries I mentioned: China, Shuria, Rubeck, Nemesi, and Birmingham. Those 4 countries: China, Russia, North Korea, and China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran are considered as the #1 enemies in all these scenarios of World War III. World War III is on the drawing board of the Pentagon. It's not to say that it will be implemented, but we have to address the nuclear option. And I should mention, but that in a sense is something which is historical, but it should be understood, is that in 1945, on the 15th of September, 1945, secret documents were drafted to wage a war, a nuclear war against 66 cities of the Soviet Union with more than 200 atomic bombs. That agenda was never implemented, but at the time, shortly after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, just over a month after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they had plans, and it's all corroborated. You can check the documents, the official declassified documents, that under the Manhattan Project, and that was Harry Truman, there was a plan to wipe the Soviet Union off the map. Now, I'm not passing a judgment on that. That's a fact. I've written extensively on that. But today we are in a different context. And I should mention that there would never have been, an arms race had it not been for the threat of Harry Truman and under the Truman Doctrine to literally to destroy the Soviet Union at a time when the 2 countries were allied. Okay, they were allies during World War II, and they were allies until the Cold War started. If I'm correct, it started in 2000. I'm sorry, it started in 1947, more or less. Okay, and there we are. We have to understand the geopolitical context, the economic context, and we have to be in solidarity worldwide, because that is the future of humanity.
Thank you for your recommendations this week. And Nadia, you have heard the call to action of Professor Michel Chossudovsky. We invite you to do 2 things. You can first visit his webpage, globalresearch.ca, and there you have articles that he wrote each week. And you can read it in more than 50 languages, so you can share around yourself and your family and around other countries. And also we invite you to support Lux Media, so we can receive on our shows authorities like Professor Chossudovsky giving a good analysis, people who have a very great experience in analyzing what is going on. So thank you for being with us and listening. Thank you. Bye-bye.